we were just talking about this, Craig. I was just telling Brendan, like, I kind of went, I don't know if it was getting sick or like I was coming off some pretty good form and I was training really hard, but then I started like figuring out the Zwift racing, like the league thing. And so I started doing all these kind of sprinty races. And I did maybe like 6, 8 races over 2 weeks. And I was always doing full sprints, and my sprint kept getting better. And then, like, after getting sick, I came back and I just felt like I went to go do this time trial effort, and I felt like I was like, yeah, I lost 15 watts. I could quantify it. It was like I lost 15 watts on my FTP because I turned that dial and the balance had gotten all screwed up. It was so just like, I mean, I've known this, but I felt it, and
then you felt it.
yeah.
I think the interesting thing is going to be when and I mean, the individualized aspect of like, there were times when I was going through that high torque phase where I was doing intensive aerobic and then a high torque, and my FTP definitely went up probably 10, 15 watts. Even my VO2 max, that went up because it felt like I could just churn a different gear. But definitely sprint, the sprint wasn't as high as if I had gone through and done some like PMAX stuff for 3 weeks. Or even 1 minute efforts. I don't think my 1 minute effort would have been that great. And this was back last April. I remember it was right before I went down to North Carolina. It was actually before I won Tour of North Georgia, which I was like, I felt so good on all of those types of efforts. I remember bridging to that lead group and I was like, I'm freaking going so fast right now. And so it's like just a little bit of this, you get a little bit less of that. And I need a little bit more of this. And so I think, and that was the thing that Tom had said. He was like, so doing this aspect when all of a sudden you spike everything with a ton of this anaerobic work, it only works if you've done tons of volume and you have like just this massive, he uses the term base, I think, just massive aerobic base. He's like, otherwise the body just that does not take that on. Like you got to be riding a bike. So I'm curious to see where it goes, and just like, I mean, this will be the biggest, no doubt, 6 weeks I've ever done. And
so back to that question I asked you about where does the shuttling and clearance fit in? It's not something that fits in separate from an FTP build. It's almost like a replacement for it, or it's a different type of FTP build, right?
Dude, that's such a good question, because I literally, I've put this together already for some other people. It's almost like I said to myself, so when you brought this up, I'm like, oh, this is like a physiology block. And then I was like, these are all supposed to be physiology blocks. Like, it got me to think about even more so, why are we doing all these workouts? And then I started going through like thought process that I have for athletes of, okay, like, it's pretty obvious why you're doing aerobic stuff right now going into pre-racing. But then, like, I had always liked threshold burst, thinking of it as the application in the race, thinking of this is such a good workout for racing faster people, for being able to beat your peers. Like, everyone's full throttle and you can go above and come back. Really, that's the lactate clearance. Just they do it a little differently. They have like a ton of different variations, he said. And it is fiddling with it. So the one I always did though was like ride 98 to 105%, spike to 120%, and come back down relatively quickly. Because that's kind of like the out of the saddle, like follow somebody, excuse me, come back down. Whereas he has ones where it's like, I think the one you just did was 120% for a minute and then come back down to like 90% for 2 minutes. It's just a different way of fluxing. Then he's got one that's 30 seconds and a minute and a half. And it's been very interesting to see the ones that I thought I would be better at were the ones closer to 100, whereas I was actually better at the ones that were farther away. So harder, but less easier recovery. But then when I went back and thought about it more, I'm like, that's really how I get dropped. It's these, we were talking about today, Craig, like it's these 15, 20, 30-minute slogs where I'm with people who are better than me in terms of wattage. And I'm hanging on there, and they might start throwing punches at each other. It gets a little like squirrely. You're in the group, and then I'm like, oh my God, I'm having a really hard time. Wheels are falling off, and then it's just lights out. And I was like, that's these like 1 minute, 2 minute, 1 minute, 2 minute, 1 minute, 2 minute. And because there are sometimes in a race, like you get dropped and you're not doing crazy watts. It's just these little surges, tick, 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 which is why I've been trying to reiterate to some guys, like, you're completing, you might be able to get through 2 of these, but I want you to get through the 3rd one, because this is, if you come and race me, I'm going to try and shred you. And I know I can't do it in 20 minutes. Give me a half an hour. And now I know I can, because you can't even complete this one. So, yeah, that's a good, does that kind of answer what you're thinking? Like it almost makes us reframe how we need to think about like everything is physiological, but it's a different way of doing FTP. I think also just having it not be, I've always trained with consistent intervals. I think the undulating power, I think there's room for both. Because there's time, at least for me, there's definitely time where I'm pinning it, but I don't think that's true for a lot of racers. I think a lot of people, if you're not off the front, it's way more of that. And if I'm in a big race,
I love this style of interval work these last couple weeks. I mean, it sucks, but it's
super fun though.
There's just it's fun. It keeps you engaged, and it's crazy when 95% FTP is like, oh, thank God I get to ride this for 2 minutes.
It's awesome. It is interesting. It's very surprising too. I think, I don't know. I'll be curious to see where this all goes. I'll be curious to see. I tried to get out of him, like, so what do you think we would do next? And he's like, I need to have a hard, I feel what I have to have a hard think on that one. I was like, okay.
Well, I mean, it's like you're being coached by a racer who understands physiology. So like a racer is going to think always, right now he's trying to train you to be stronger. Like, so he's training you using his understanding of physiology. But like the racer side of him would just be like, all right, cool. Here's the event. Now I know what to do based on this arc from now to then, but there's no then. So It's like, well, I guess you just train.
It actually makes me think of like boxing when they go out and they've got like their trainer and they're like, Mike Tyson, the game, you went and you did training for a while, you jogged, you did some jabs, you like, there were no events. And he said what we have said forever. He's like, once you have that event and you can work backwards, it's so much easier. And I was like, dude, let's just, at this point for me, I'm not going to race until I can get a vaccine. I've come this far. And after talking to some people that have gotten COVID and are athletes and are not doing well, I don't want to do that. So I was like, I don't see it happening. Let's say June. And I was like, so we got time. Let's just train, man. He's like, let's get it. And I was like, sweet. So I do have a down week right around Thanksgiving. Go until November, Valentine's Day. And so we'll see.